when we look historically, if we want to, at what has happened in the name of...
I totally understand. I think also, by the way, Michael, the audience understands what has happened in the name and using religion. I do. Right. And I want to grant them that they know too, and that we can separate the fact from the fiction. I want to input one thing before you finish this.
Yes.
And that is that it's not just the emotion that's responding to you. You know, there is intelligence that has an emotive component to it. A, there's nothing wrong with that. And B, the reason that I believe we are born as emotional beings is that is part of our spirituality as well. Spirituality is not just dissonance. It's not just detachment. It's connection too. It's stuff that comes from the heart. So I believe that we have this capability to emote as a connection point, to see, in fact, if we are connected to that which we're even referring to or talking about. You and I live at a time right now where we are all aware that there has just been a UN appointee to oversee contact with extraterrestrial beings. You're aware of that?
I am not only aware of it, I sent them information on it. I don't know that it's going to be relevant at all because there will be no extraterrestrial contact with this world for several hundred years.
I think it's very interesting that they did that, and I think it's very interesting that they also talked about how they would be able to, quote, handle and control the communication.
Yeah, sure. Well, here's a question.
That's the biggest blind spot in the whole world.
Oh, all right. Yes, I know.
Isn't it?
And here's
it's riotous.
This is what I've written to this is what I think anyhow about the UN and the rest of all of the UFO investigators and all the UN and all the rest of this. If they wanted to just go over to Switzerland and spend a little time, they would have ample evidence of UFO contact, and then they can take it from there. They're not going to. SETI is a complete waste of time. You have groups like Exopolitics and MUFON, and all these people are just joking around with themselves because they refuse to wrestle with the Meier case. I don't mind if they want to say, hey, I'm going to show you it's a hoax, and here's how. They won't touch it because it bursts their bubble and it takes away their reason for being. And I'm speaking from very personal experience with people in all those areas, from Seth Shostak to Stephen Bassett. I've been involved in trying to communicate with these people. And I'm going to, if I can, I want to go back, though, to what we were just on about emotion and stuff.
Yes.
Okay. Emotion about things is fine. And I have a fair amount of emotion. It helps keep me going. It isn't simply logic that drives me to do what I do. But I think it's enormously important when we get to this one area, which is a hot button area. You notice that I didn't, that if the Playaran had said, and by the way, you have to make sure everybody understands that there's gravity and anti-gravity. Well, we wouldn't be very emotional about that. It'd be neutral. But the hot button of the religious thing is that hot button. And why? In other words, they are either right or they're wrong, in my opinion.
Yes.
Either they are right or they're wrong. Well, I don't have to accept it. I want to research this issue and I want to understand. For instance, one of the tracts that Meier had written recently that is not yet officially translated into English, is very lengthy about the role of the Catholic Church in the persecution of the so-called witches, how they wiped out the women, throughout Europe and all of this brutally with this whole witchcraft thing by setting up this insanity because the women who possessed understanding, knowledge, who were strong in their femininity, their sensuality, their
intuition.
Sexuality. Yes, and how insidious this really was. When you go deeper into the Meier case and you realize that when Muhammad came, who gets a bad rap, even though they say, no, he was a true prophet, but as it was prophesied about him, his teaching would also be falsified into a false and evil cult that will take and corrupt these things and then give the descendants of the Israelites no peace until the end of time unless they make a true and conciliatory peace with the descendants of the rightful owners of the lands that have been stolen by the Israelites of the Canaanite days and times. But this is so intricately involved with every aspect of our actual history and the formation of our religion. So when Muhammad got his mission to do, it was basically to stem the power of the Catholic Church, which, according to this information, otherwise would have literally succeeded in enslaving the entire planet. It would have just been planet church, and we would have been baked under that. And when people like these make their seemingly insanely insensitive, or you can even say whatever you want to call it, pronouncements and all, because they just really do live in another place, I mean, in every sense, you go, okay, well, buck it up here. Let's find out. If they're wrong, let's call it out. And there have been 2 or 3 things where Meier and they were patently wrong, and where they came right up real fast on it and said, we are wrong about this. We have additional information. It wasn't anything as profound as religions. It was some other kind of a thing where they misread something and they said, wait a minute, we've made a mistake, because we're not going to lie about it, going back to that. I'm going to just put it out like this. This, in the way in which you reacted, which I really liked because of the passion you brought to your point of view, this is where, if we dare bust the taboo on examining, well, let's look at religion. Is there truth in religion, in all religion? Of course. There would be no danger if there was not truth. But their position is, while there is truth in almost every religion, the religions themselves are false because they are built on a false premise. They took the true teaching and they corrupted it for the power of a church, of a cult, of a religion, of a sect. And so you have, because people have an equally innate goodness inside of them, when they are offered something that in effect is saying, this is the source of all life and goodness, come and be nourished here and do what this deity says is the good thing to do and the right thing to do, which in biblical terms could also be stoning your family to death if they do the wrong thing. People responded from the earliest times out of wanting to do good and to be in alignment with that greater power. So the fear and control was set in motion millennia ago. And this is something that is more tightly holding a tighter grip on people even who are not religious, but who are even spiritual. People in the New Age who come up with these cockamamie ideas, ascension. What are these? That's reworked Christianity. If you go into the Meier material, well, yes, Emmanuel was crucified, but it wasn't resurrection. He was ministered to and healed over a 3-day period by healers from India that were brought in because they knew this had to go down, and he had to walk that gig. But I have and I'm rambling a little here just to dig you in. Religion in this whole thing is looked at very, very, very deeply. My issue with let's say the Plejaren who were at the time involved with Emmanuel, whose name got changed to Jesus, was, didn't they know that if they didn't make this guy more visible as a real living guy who survived the crucifixion physically with the help of others, that this was going to go and be turned into a deification of a human being? And the answer is, wherever human beings are involved, things can and will get screwed up. And I think that those ETs at the time who were trying to work that mission screwed it up. That's my personal opinion. And they may disagree with me in Switzerland about that, but so much of the grief of this world, Christianity and Islam and even some of the stuff of Judaism, would never have happened if after that crucifixion, when he was healed and brought back as a physical being and was going to leave there on his way to India with his family, where he ultimately settled in Srinagar. Again, this is information from the case. If they had not allowed him to be deified, to have been magically raised from the dead, if they'd made sure, if they'd looked forward in time and said, wait a minute, unless this guy is seen having lunch and sitting around with people and still has his wounds and says, well, these guys from India came and here's the back entrance to the tomb, if they had only done that, we would have had 2,000 years of less grief. That's my personal feeling about it.
Interesting. Very interesting.
I could be wrong, but I have a right to be.
Absolutely.
So if these folks are saying, well, your religions are based on fantasy lives, well, okay, but your forefathers were the ones that set so much of that grief in motion. Didn't they know with Enoch, or then Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, Muhammad? Didn't they know? Well, yes, they knew, but the probabilities, because you still have free will down here. See, there is answer to that is consistent with our free will, with the laws of cause and effect and all of that, but as an emotional human being. And I wrote this to one of my friends in Switzerland 2 weeks ago. I said, I think this is what blew it.